Ever had to make a tough decision that affected your family? Well, this story begins with a seemingly perfect arrangement. Imagine being a single mom, working long, grueling shifts as a nurse. It's not easy, particularly when you're raising two young kids, 8 and 6 years old. After the kid's father passed away, life got a whole lot more challenging. Suddenly, balancing work and childcare became a tightrope walk. So what's a mom to do? Well, the answer seemed pretty straightforward. It was time to bring in a live-in nanny. After all, I had a guest bedroom just sitting there waiting to be of some use. Now here's where it gets interesting. My niece had just gotten accepted into the university nearby. She was looking to save on the dorm costs and I had a room to spare. So she made an offer. She'd watch my kids on the 3 days I worked if she could live there rent-free. Considering the situation, this was a golden opportunity. She was done with her classes by 1 in the afternoon, which worked perfectly with my schedule. She'd be there to take care of the kids from the time they got off school at 3 until I got home from work at 12:30 in the morning. And so, we struck a deal. I'd provide her with free accommodation, and on top of that, I'd also pay her $22 an hour, a competitive rate for our area. She'd fix dinner for the kids, put them to bed, and then she'd be free to do whatever she pleased. For 2 years, this arrangement worked like a dream. My niece never raised any complaints and the kids were well taken care of. It was a win-win situation for everyone involved. But as you may have guessed, this story doesn't end here, because as we all know, life has a way of changing things. And change, my friends, is precisely what was on the horizon. Little did we know, our perfect arrangement was about to be disrupted. Just when everything seemed to be going smoothly, a change was on the horizon. The niece, who had been a reliable and helpful presence in the house, had been presented with an exciting opportunity. As life has a habit of doing, it had thrown a curveball into our well-established routine. The niece was offered a paid internship, one that was directly related to her field of study. This was a fantastic chance for her to gain practical experience and to further her career prospects. However, the internship came with a significant caveat. It would make her unavailable to continue her duties as a nanny for the children. Upon hearing the news, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was truly happy for her. This was an opportunity that could open many doors for her future. But on the other hand, I couldn't help but worry about the impact this would have on our living arrangements. I knew that I couldn't afford to lose my live-in nanny, especially with my demanding work schedule. So I suggested that she might want to consider moving into student housing or finding an apartment nearby. With 3 months left before her internship started, we had some time to figure things out. However, my suggestion was met with confusion. The niece was perplexed, wondering why she would have to move out. After all, she had been living there rent-free, and moving out would mean having to pay rent and possibly losing her ability to save money. She voiced her concerns, stating that this seemed unfair. I tried to explain my reasoning, emphasizing that I simply needed a live-in nanny, and I only had 1 guest room. If she could no longer fulfill her duties as a nanny, I would have to find someone who could, and that person would need a place to stay. This new development was met with confusion and frustration. This was certainly not the outcome any of us had anticipated. But as we all know, life has a way of throwing us curveballs when we least expect them. Suddenly, what seemed like a straightforward situation became a dilemma. You see, my niece was upset. She argued that it wasn't fair. She was concerned about money, about saving for her future. She felt that moving into a dorm or an apartment would eat into her savings. Now I could understand where she was coming from. After all, she was just starting out in her career, every penny counted. But I had my own concerns too. I had my kids to think about. I had to work long hours and I needed someone reliable to take care of them. And let's be honest, aftercare isn't cheap. It's not just about the money though. I didn't want my kids to spend long hours in aftercare. I wanted them to be home, in a familiar environment, where they could relax and be themselves. I tried to explain this to my niece. I pointed out that having a live-in nanny would work best for me. The nanny could pick up the kids from school so they didn't have to stay in aftercare for too long. And if the nanny lived in, she wouldn't have to drive home late at night. This was important to me. I've experienced the fatigue of driving home after a long shift. It's not safe, it's not ideal. But my niece had a counterpoint. She argued that the nanny could leave at the end of her shift, just like any other job. I understood her perspective, but I also knew the reality. I had spoken to potential nannies and they didn't want to drive home so late. It was a safety concern, and it was a valid one. So there I was, caught in a dilemma. On one hand, I had my niece who was upset and felt that she was being treated unfairly. On the other hand, I had my own needs, my own concerns. I was a single mom, working long hours trying to provide the best for my kids. But the objections didn't stop there. And now, the extended family had something to say about the situation. My niece's parents, my sister-in-law and brother, were taken aback by the change in living arrangements. They live a good 3 hours away, making commuting for my niece an impractical option. They felt the arrangement was unfair, that their daughter was being displaced suddenly due to circumstances beyond her control. They proposed an alternative. They suggested I should find a nanny who would be willing to commute late at night, to drive home after her shift ended at midnight. On the surface, this might seem like a plausible solution, but when you delve into the practicality of it, the situation becomes complex. Consider this. It's late at night, the roads are dark and often deserted, and the nanny has just completed a long shift taking care of children. Is it really safe for her to drive home at this hour? And as a nurse, I understand the dangers of fatigue and the risks associated with drowsy driving. We can't forget that at the end of the day, a nanny isn't just an employee but a human being with their own safety to consider. I've spoken to potential nannies about this proposition. The feedback has been unanimous. They've expressed concerns about their safety driving home so late. Some outright said no. It's not hard to understand why. After a long day of work, driving home in the dead of night isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially dangerous. Let's remember that we're not talking about a simple 9-to-5 job here. The nanny's workday would end well into the night, and as much as I appreciate my niece's contribution, her new internship takes precedence. It's an exciting opportunity for her, and it's important to respect that. In the midst of this debate, one thing is clear. The safety and well-being of everyone involved, from my children to my niece and the potential nanny, is paramount. The challenge is finding a solution that caters to everyone's needs without compromising on this essential point. Despite the differing opinions, the safety and well-being of all involved remained a priority. In the end, a decision had to be made. But was it the right one? The question looms over the room, echoing the sentiment of the family and the viewers alike. Let's take a moment to recap the situation, shall we? Our storyteller is a single mom, working long hours as a nurse, and had found a perfect arrangement with her niece. The niece, a university student, moved in to act as a nanny for her children, saving costs on dorms while earning a competitive wage. For 2 years, this ingenious solution worked seamlessly, creating a harmonious atmosphere in the household. However, the winds of change swept in when the niece secured a paid internship. A wonderful opportunity for her, no doubt, but it also meant she wouldn't be available to watch the kids anymore. The storyteller congratulated her niece and suggested they start looking into student housing or an apartment. This is where the discord started. The niece, hoping to continue living rent-free while still saving money, was upset at the prospect of moving out. The storyteller, however, had to consider the needs of her children first. She needed a live-in nanny, and there was only one guest room. She also pointed out that it would be best for the children to have a nanny pick them up from school rather than staying in aftercare for extended periods. The niece suggested the new nanny could drive home after her shift, but the safety of a tired nanny driving home so late was a valid concern the storyteller couldn't ignore. Her family believes she's being unfair, but the storyteller feels she's in a tough spot. She's trying to find a solution that works best for her children, and isn't that what parents are supposed to do? Prioritize their children's needs above all else? So, here we are, at the crux of the story, with one burning question. Was the storyteller wrong in her decision? Should she have tried harder to accommodate her niece's wish to stay, or was she right to prioritize the needs of her children? So, tell us, what would you have done in this situation?